I know. I'm not going to get crazy with this, but for what we're talking about today, while we're going through it, I want you to just consider power. What is it? Who has it? How do they get it? How do they keep it? And what does that mean to you? Literature, especially in the ancient era, is an extraordinarily cultivated phenomenon. There were no bestsellers. There were no beach books, no Barnes & Noble on every corner. Very few people could read. Reading itself was largely just for mid-level functionaries. The first languages, written languages, that we have records of coming out of the Arabian Peninsula, the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, that general region, the writing was pretty much all about just record keeping. Finance. The first spreadsheets were the first books, essentially. And people would have, tablets with, this guy owes me that. And I have this much. I would like to sell some. And I need to keep this much for myself. But over time, people started spreading it out and finding that it had other uses. We'll get into this a little bit more when we get to Homer. But what I think is very significant, especially dealing with the really old stuff, the really ancient stuff, is how precious it was and what it took to preserve it. This was way before the printing press. This was people carving it on a rock. This was people maybe writing it down on scrolls of different forms and different materials, and then preserving those scrolls. They're not particularly sturdy. The benefit of carving in a rock is that rock is pretty sturdy. They tend to break over the time, but they last. A scroll, or anything paper-ish, and we're long before the invention of paper here, needs people to care for it. They need to all be hand copied. When you have something that is significant and somebody says, we should make a copy of that, that itself is very precious, because you have to find somebody who can write, and you have to find something decent that they can write it on. And then you have to spend a couple of centuries gingerly caring for this document. And in some of these cases, these corners of the world were a little rough. A lot of these people were on the move. They weren't sitting around. They couldn't just, I keep it in my study. It's in a hermetically sealed little vault. It's great. It's temperature controlled, moisture controlled. It's fine there. No. It's getting tossed into the back of a cart every couple of days when it's time to move the sheep. That takes a lot of effort. Why would someone do that? Have something to read before bed at night? Probably not. For the beauty? Maybe.
Observation.
Observation of what?
The surroundings. Kind of like Darwin. I mean, that was after what you're saying. But Darwin kind of wasn't the smartest person ever, but he just observed the surroundings. And he ended up coming across like the greatest findings in history.
Sure. Record keeping.
Just because he was observing, you know?
Yeah. Looking around and saying, this is what I see. Not that different than the cave drawings. This is what I see. This is my world. This is my reality. That is a way of giving a gift to the people who come after. Because it really doesn't benefit you that much. Especially when you're considering like lifespans probably not all that long. It's not like you're going to be able to compare. Well, 40 summers ago, I saw this many, elk out my window, and now it's much, much less. Nobody's really hanging around that long. Those elk have probably eaten you by now. TJ.
They probably, like I read in the book, they were keeping their writings to innovate, make it easier for it to interpret, like as days go on. So like it started from the tablet and the rocks, and then it went to paper, and then the writings were changed to pictures, to letters.
Yeah.
Just to like have a record how they evolved over time.
The history of writing is a big part of this. It became progressively easier. At first, it was just kind of carving it into a rock. And they developed different forms of paper-like stuff. They went to, one of the more popular from where we're talking about now was cuneiform, which is just they took basically a slab of clay and stuck little shapes in it, and that was lettering. The clay would harden with those little shapes impressed in it. And then you've got yourself a document right there. A little labor-intensive, a little heavy to lug around. It took great care to preserve these things. And the fact that we have any at all is astounding. But I would argue, and I will, that a lot of what we're seeing here has to do with power. Because power is not a gift. Power is not altruism. You can keep records and take notes for future generations, and that's great. But if it doesn't benefit you, you're less interested in that. I want my grandkids to do well in life. I don't have any yet. Don't think I'm that old. But it's not as strong of a motivator as I'm hungry. Think about power. But consider the great hymn to the Aten. This is a poem. It's got a little story sort of going through it. A little light on thing. What it really is a song of praise that was found carved, I believe, on a sepulcher, basically somebody's tomb. And it has an interesting little story to tell and an interesting little twist at the end. And along the way, it does a lot of different things that I think are pretty amazing and worth people preserving, making eternal by carving it onto a tomb. Tomb of nobody necessarily all that important in the larger scheme of things, but this gives an idea of what was important. We can start to get a picture of the people. This is in my book on my page 25. Splendid you rise in heaven's light land, O living Aten, creator of life. When you have dawned in eastern light land, you fill every land with your beauty. You are beauteous, great, radiant, high over every land. Your rays embrace the lands, to the limit of all that you made. Being ray, you reach the limits. You bend them for the sun whom you love. Though you are far, your rays are on earth. Though one sees you, your strides are unseen. This is quite a beginning. Started off with a bang. What is your impression from this? Yes?
I find it in the footnote on, it says your beauty on footnote 7.
Mm-hmm.
That like it says beauty also means presence. So like if you're not beautiful, like do you even have a presence? Something like that, I guess.
Does anyone really see ugly people? Yeah, maybe. That's a good point. They are valuing beauty, certainly. Physical, observable beauty. Not, oh, he's beautiful on the inside, but, he's Quasimodo on the out. No, this is all about surface here.
Yeah.
Excellent observation. What else can we tell about this? What other values are being expressed? What other characteristics are there? Every line says something specific, and it doesn't say it by accident. I point out again, this was carved. It was not scribbled. There's no just, oh, this is a rough draft. I'm just going to spit some stuff out, then I'll go back and I'll correct it later. We all get kind of lazy that way because it's so easy to write these days. When you got to carve something, you get it right on the first time. And every word is significant. Every choice is significant. There's nothing accidental. What does Lightland mean? I missed that on the map. Yeah.
So Aten is the Egyptian god of sun, so the light lands will be like when the sun is up, the god is watching you.
Yeah. But think a little bit more specifically here. Why is the sun a god for these people? You can make anything a god. To me, honestly, and I know you know where I'm going with this, that coffee cup is a god.
It's the only way they survive.
The only way they survive? How so?
If they didn't have the sun, they'd be dead.
I think we can say that about pretty much everyone, yeah.
That too, but in the next stanza paragraph, it talks about how it provides lightness, and then as the sun sets, a lot of animals come out, so it's kind of fearful, and then mostly like people start robbing in the dark.
Okay, yeah.
They see as the sun god as protection.
Bad things happen in the dark.
Also, like, it helps their crops grow, like the sun. So
Yeah.
it's a source of life for them.
We have no sun, no crops. This is an agricultural society. To a degree. Just think, however, about the part of the world we're talking about. Where are we talking about here? Roughly. Anybody? Is it Barbados? Is it San Francisco?
It's Egypt.
Egypt. Okay, Egypt. Roughly 1350 BCE. When you wake up in the morning, what do you see?
Sand, desert.
Sand, desert. All right, that's a whole lot of nothing. What do you see above it?
The sun.
The sun. What's the only thing you can see repeatedly throughout the day that's of any note? The sun. The sun is a commanding presence in their life. The sun, I think we can all agree, in Egypt in the summertime, even if you have not been there, is probably very warm. Probably very threatening, even. Probably something to be cautious of. It is at the same time, however, a very beautiful image, because this is celebrating the sun. It's not a fearful thing, it's joy. And saying that the presence of this God, the sun, though you are far, your rays are on earth. The presence of the deity is here with us. All we have to do is look around, and it is everywhere. Because again, if you're staring out at a desert landscape, the sun is the only thing you can really see. It commands everything. The light of the sun itself reflects up off the sand. It is everything. So it's devotional, it's gratitude because of the crops. At a little while, what do you think? Where'd it go? Earth brightens when you dawn in light land, when you shine as Aten of daytime. As you dispel the dark, you cast your rays. The two lands are in festivity. Awake, they stand on their feet. You have roused them. Bodies cleansed, clothed, their arms adore your appearance. The entire land sets out to work. All beasts browse on the herbs. Trees, herbs are sprouting. Birds fly from the nest. Their wings greeting your ka. All flocks frisk on their feet. All that fly up and alight. They live when you dawn for them. Ships fare north, fare south as well. Roads lie open when you rise. The fish in the river dart before you. Your rays are in the midst of the sea. Who makes the seed grow in women? Who creates people from sperm? Who feeds the son in his mother's womb? Who soothes them to still his tears? This is everything. This is an enormous power. This is divine magnificence brought down to human level to affect them in every way possible. They're talking about commerce, for God's sakes. He makes the ships go. The God of the sun controls salesmen. The God of the sun makes the animals come out. The God of the sun makes the trees and the plants grow. The God of the sun is fertility, brings forth babies, nourishes, who feeds the son in his mother's womb, who soothes him to still his tears, responsible for everything, the most personal and the most social and political. Trade, commerce, government activity, ordinary lives, just moving about, the business of living, but down on the molecular level of starting a life. And the specificity of those details is really pretty striking. It's one thing to say, God is great, God is enormous. Oh, God, 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 you are so wonderful. You are so great. You are so terrific. You are everything. You are my life. You are everything. You are wonderful. You are great. You are terrific. You'll notice that doesn't go anywhere. That doesn't get anything done. That doesn't really impress after a while because it starts to become dull. It's flat. It's abstract. Specifics. The entire land sets out to work. Not just to do anything, but to work. Talking about the birds, the trees, the herbs. The sperm, for God's sakes. Specifics. Create this sense of the enormity of this project and the detail within it. And there's something quite, I don't want to go whole hog aesthetic on you, but there's something quite beautiful in that notion of scale, of scope, of wonder that is overwhelming. Your rays nurse all fields. When you shine, they live, they grow for you. You made the seasons to foster all that you made, winter to cool them, heat that they taste you. You made the far sky to shine therein, to behold all that you made. You alone, shining in your form of living Aten, risen, radiant, distant, near. You made millions of forms from yourself alone. Towns, villages, fields, the river's course. Towns, villages, fields. Again, we're getting very specific. We're talking about municipal levels of government here. Social and historical factors mixed in with grand metaphysics. All credited to Aten alone. He repeats that. Alone. All to you alone. Repetition is one of the earliest poetic devices. And whenever something repeats, that's not because, well, they didn't know that many words back then. That's not because, well, maybe that's the translator here. It might be, but I doubt it. Because the modern sensibility of translation would say that, well, we got to keep it fresh. We got to keep it, changing all the time. We don't want to sound repetitious if we can possibly avoid it, because that will bore modern readers. So when a translator comes along and says, no, they're using the same term, or the same figure if it's cuneiform, or the same something, they are repeating this for a reason, I have to ask, why? Why? Alone. These little patterns start to arise as you read. Little curiosities like, why'd they do that? Little irritants like, what? I like variety. I'm a modern guy, believe it or not. I like things to change. I don't like to be told the same thing again and 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 again. So when somebody keeps spitting out that word alone, it's a burr in the saddle. It's getting me. Was that a hand? What do you got?
I'm slightly confused. I thought the ancient Egyptian religion was polytheistic.
Yeah.
So then keep on saying alone.
Yeah. Well, that's a point. That is. Historically, polytheism has a very muddy tradition on the outsides of it. That sounds pejorative, but I'm just saying that the lines were a little bit more porous than you might think. And particular localities tended to have their favorites. There are many gods, but we got our guy. It's like, I'm a big fan of the NFL, but when the Giants are in it, I really care. Not to really go coarse on you there. But excellent observation. Little things like that. Why would they say that? Why would they stress that? Because I got to tell you, I'm setting this up. You're going to get a little answer here, or at least a response. Turning the page. You are in my heart. There is no other who knows you, only your son. Huh? There's another guy on the scene suddenly. There is, after all of this buildup, oh God, oh son, you are the only thing, you do everything, you are enormous, you are magnificent, you are everything in the world. Oh, and you've got a son. Now, that is a seemingly slight variation in the whole polytheistic question. But look where they go with this. Your only son, Nefertiti, I'm going to butcher every pronunciation in every language, in everything we read, so I won't hold you to anything if you don't hold me to anything. Nefertiti, soul of one ray, whom you have taught your ways and your might, those on earth come from your hand as you made them. When you have dawned, they live. When you set, they die. You yourself are lifetime. The one lives by you. All eyes are on your beauty, until you rest. All labor ceases when you rest in the west. When you rise, you stir everyone for the king. Every leg is on the move since you founded the earth. You rouse them for your son who came from your body. The king who lives by Mat, the lord of the two lands, Nefertiti, soul of one Re, the son of Re, who lives by Mat, the lord of crowns, Akhenaten, great in his lifetime, and the great queen whom he loves, the lady of the two lands, Neferuatun, Nefertiti, living forever. What does that last little stanza do? In the back, what's your name?
Well, Akhenaten was.
Your name is not Akhenaten.
I know. My name is Tony. But
Hi, Tony.
Was the one of the Egyptian pharaohs that he tried to monotheisticize Egyptian religion by
Yep.
centering it around the god named Aten-Ra. Well, he renamed the god to Aten-Ra.
Right.
Just the sun, and he was an embodiment of the god on the land.
Yep. He wanted to center the polytheistic tradition around his guy. And who is that guy, that god, to this king, according to this?
His father.
His father! Isn't that convenient? Seems almost like nepotism, but honestly, it's kind of the reverse. Because here you have the son celebrating the father, building him up. Think about, now I just read little snippets throughout. I did not read all of this. We're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 long stanzas before we get to that one that puts the little spin on it. 6 stanzas of celebrating the one and only, magnificent, all-encompassing, all-powerful, all-knowing God. Oh, and he has a son. And wouldn't you know it? He's the king sitting on the throne right now. He's in charge. And he's the only one who knows that God. So, it's in your best interest. We all love Aten. We all love God, right? We gotta love the son too. And think about now those specifics, those images. They weren't just accidental. Some of them were quite poetic. The animals, the plants, the sperm. But there was another note getting jabbed through there. The ships. Sailing north and south. Trade happening. The specifics of towns and villages and municipal level government. The entire land sets out to what? To pray? To contemplate the beauty of existence? No. What do they set out to do? Work! If you are a king, what do you really want your people to do?
To work and obey.
To work! Obeying comes hand in hand with that. If you can get them to work, you can build a great civilization. You can build great tombs with poems inscribed in them that celebrate your magnificence. You can build, I don't know, when you start to get really ambitious, maybe a large structure for your burial that I think we can all admit takes a lot of work. You need them to work. So it helps enormously if they think you're not only the son of a God, but the son of the one God who matters. It's a little bait and switch at the end. Celebrating the magnificence of God. Oh, and here on earth, we're just going to worship the king because it's basically the same thing, right? Yeah! Bloodlines. Family resemblance. Convenient. There are very beautiful moments in this, which through, grand translations of language and time, and even orthography at this point, because we're talking about pictographs, really. There are those moments where you get the sense of the scope and the grandness and the grandeur of the imagery. And that is in itself quite appealing. And it's very comforting to be told that this being in the sky, which so dominates the landscape, it's the only thing out there in many respects. And every minute of your day is impacted by it. Long before SPF 15. Imagine the power of the sun. To be told that it is good, that it is on your side, not necessarily everyone's side, but on your side, that it, all-powerful, values you and your ordinary life, not just the king and the priests and the holy people of all stripes, but values you for the things that are on your level, your work. Agriculture, trade, basic level, ordinary concerns of human beings. There is something quite inspiring in that, quite beautiful. So, it's not necessarily propaganda, although it kind of works like that at the end. But along the way, you can see threaded in these moments of illumination, of spirituality, and art that is appealing to you on other levels. So while it's clearly trying to sell you a vision of power and perpetuate that as much as possible, it's appealing to you on other levels as well. And that's where it gets its greatness. Bearing that in mind, take a quick look at a somewhat similar, I'm going to skip through all that. Oh wow, I thought I lost that. Yeah, well, what are you going to do? Tradition. Right down the road, Genesis. Genesis is the first book of the so-called Hebrew Bible. The dating on this is always very uncertain. We don't have a lot of stuff. A lot of these stories come from older oral traditions within them, and the Bible itself is really an anthology more than a single work. Nobody sat down and just wrote in one sitting the entire Bible. It was essentially a big loose leaf notebook that people were jamming stuff in for years. And at certain points in history, different people came along and sorted them out a little bit. And sometimes the logic of that sorting has been, a point of great debate and contention for as long as the book has been around. Not just for what the various little stories say in their content, but for how they compare to one another. So you get often dueling versions of the same story. When you get to Noah, you read the story of, he was told, two of each kind of animal, they come on 2 by 2, and it's, that tends to be the one that gets all the painting and stuff like that. Everybody remembers that story. But then you read just a couple lines more, and oh my God, there's another version. And suddenly he's bringing, I think, 7 of each kind. That doesn't really make sense to me, but, And there's no explanation of one to the other. In Genesis itself, mankind is created twice. There's no explanation that, God gets a mulligan. The first one didn't go so well. That was the beta test. We got to get rid of that. There's no explanation. There is just that conflict, and people argue about whether or not these things are valuable. Or which one should be paid attention to, or what the contradiction in itself means. Scholars have identified certain distinct voices within the Bible, coming from different eras, some of which actually wrote portions, others were more like editing and stuff like that. And that gets really, really heavy textual, where you can go along and people will tell you, like, okay, this word was written from the tradition of the so-called priestly writers, and the next word over is one from the Deuteronomy tradition. Well, that doesn't really happen, actually, but what is it? The J writer for the Yahwist tradition, I'm blanking on them. The J, where I have all these written. The J writer, the Elohist, the Deuteronomic, whatever, and priestly. I cannot speak. My point is, there are a lot of different voices jostling around in here, and you can't get thrown by that, but you can't ignore it either, because it is not a solid work. It is very open, no matter what anybody's going to tell you. It is very open to going in and saying, I know that people say that this means one thing, but I got to tell you, I'm getting something totally different out of it. And that's fine. But I want to take, again, bearing in mind where we're coming from. Consider how the world began. When God began to create heaven and earth, and the earth was welter and waste, the darkness was over the deep, and God's breath hovering over the waters, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, and that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And it was the evening, and it was the morning, first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the water from water." And God made the vault, and it divided the water beneath the vault of the water above the vault, and so it was. And God called the vault heavens, and it was evening, and it was morning, second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered in one place, so that the dry land will appear." And so it was. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. First impressions? Everybody has some notion of this story has been told in the past. Well,
It seems very straightforward.
very straightforward. Not a lot of fancy language here. You don't read this part of the Bible for poetry. There's a lot of poetry in the Bible, but it tends to come a little bit later. This is a very stripped down narrative. Why? Why wouldn't they pull out some more bells and whistles and, you know, yank out a thesaurus and make with the adjectives?
Maybe they wanted like everyone to be able to read it, so they made it very like simple.
That's a good point. Literacy was fairly rare in the ancient world. So you have to make it accessible if you want people to read it. If you want particular people to read it. Because you can write the same stuff in a very elevated tone, and the only people who are going to read it are the educated, who tend to be, oh, I don't know, the powerful. And that's one way of controlling your demographic. What? Over there. Hi, what's your name?
Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
I thought I read kind of like a plan, like a to-do list, kind of checking off the boxes.
Yeah! You can see God with his iPad just knocking down one after the other. It is very methodical. It is very straightforward. It's very deliberate. He did this, he did this, he did this. You don't see him hemming and hawing and saying, well, you know, what now? He doesn't have writer's block necessarily. He's just going about it. He's getting the job done. Job! Work! Symbolic level? I don't know. Maybe, but I'm not going there just yet. I was cheating a little when I was reading that, and I was punching one word above more than the rest, and that one word tended to be repeated. Repetition. What word was that?
Wasn't that like, it's good?
Good was repeated. I wasn't necessarily, I was keeping that one fairly monotone. Good was repeated. That is very commented on. That is a very legitimate thing. The early Hebrews were coming along at a time when the prevailing view of most religious traditions is that their gods could sometimes be good, sometimes be bad. Sometimes one god could be good and bad, depending on his mood or whether or not you were one of his favorites. So to have a god and a creation itself be considered and deemed all good is somewhat revolutionary. A lot of scholars have come along and said that that itself is the most significant aspect of the development of Judaism in the early world. Because before that, God could be nasty. I mean, Aten, again, the sun is great, but if you're out there without a hat, it can be just brutal. Over there, hi.
I feel like he was trying to create a balance. I feel like he was trying to create a balance between like positive and negative.
Positive and negative? How so?
Like I feel like, for example, when he created like the I feel like for example, there is cold and there is when it's hot, right? So I feel like if it was all hot, then we all probably would have died by now, right? So I feel like God has like everything that He created. I feel like He created a balance just to balance things out.
Okay. He doesn't address hot and cold necessarily.
But the balance could be as in hot and cold, like days are hot and the nights are cooler.
Yeah, possibly.
And then the water and the earth dry.
So by that calculation, I'm assuming you're saying hot is good, cold is bad. I would agree, by the way. I hate the cold. And that day is good and night is bad, so like what you were saying about Aten. Okay, that's reasonable. But why is it good and bad? Why are some things good and some things bad? Why do you have to do that?
Create temptation, I guess.
Temptation? How so?
I don't know, maybe challenge your faith, like how loyal are you, I guess.
Okay, I think we're getting to there.
Like, yeah, maybe, I don't know, I don't want to like skip ahead, but like maybe like.
It's hard in stuff like this where it's just sort of baked into the culture for so many thousands of years.
So like I guess when Eve went to like get the apple, I guess, God said every fruit except that.
We'll get there in a little bit. Temptation is coming. Divided. Somebody did say it before. Divided is the word that I punched an awful lot. Now, again, this is a translation. I do not read Hebrew. I am told, however, by people who do, that the words are largely similar in their repetition as they go throughout. And that this particular translation, Robert Alter, just finished his translation of, I believe, the entire Hebrew Bible. He's been working on this for decades at this point. Is particularly admired for its literal value. Because a lot of people, when they come to translation or anything like that, they will start to impose upon the text their own ideas about it. And that can muddy things up. So his version tends to be a little bit more stripped down than some of the others. You can read other translations of the Bible which are very poetic and are meant to be very sweeping and to appeal to more modern sensibilities that will respond to the poetry a little bit more emotionally. This is trying to do something very differently. And I think the word divides is significant because the first act of God is really an act of division. He creates light from darkness, and he has that comparison. He has that balance, if you will, but it's a balance that is defined by a stark line between the two. You can't have a balance of one thing. This is a division of one thing from another, an evaluation of one being good, one being bad. He divided the light from the darkness. He divided the water from the water. Or water from the land, technically. He used the land to divide the water. Land was good, water was bad. We're talking about seawater there also, ocean water. People in the desert value water, and we'll get to that. But, let the waters under the heaven be gathered in one place so that the dry land will appear. And so it was. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And then he goes on and continues to create by dividing, distinguishing. And so it was, and the earth put forth grass, plants yielding seeds, and trees bearing fruit of each kind. And God saw that it was good, and it was evening and it was morning the third day. And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and they shall be signs of the fixed times for the days and the years, and they shall be lights in the vaults of the heavens to light up the earth. And so it was. And God made two great lights, the great light for dominion of day, and a small light for the dominion of night, and the stars. And God placed them in the vault of the heavens to light up the earth and have dominion over the day and night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And it was evening and it was morning, fourth day. And God said, let the waters swarm with the swarm of living creatures, and let fowl fly over the earth across the vault of the heavens. And God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that crawls from the earth, and swarmed forth of each kind, and the winged fowl of each kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the water and the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And it was evening and it was morning, fifth day. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures of each kind, cattle and crawling things, and the wild beasts of each kind. Do you see the pattern? distinction, division, often with evaluation saying this is good, that not so much. The day is good, it gets a big light. The night less so, it gets a little light. The animals are distinguished by each kind. Division is God's way. Think about that. They could have started this story any number of ways. An infinite number of ways to describe the creation of the universe. Why go there? Think about it.
I guess division as in separation of power.
Division as in separation of power?
Like you said, there are animals of certain kinds. Like there are certain animals that will eat the other animals. So like, you know, some animals will have power over the other.
Yeah.
And then it's like food chain type thing.
He talks about dominion. That's power. That's a hierarchy, if you will. And he is building up. And all of this is sort of ascending. He's starting on, it's getting, the creations are getting more specialized. He starts with, the universe. And then he starts, he gets into building continents, and then all the animals. First all the animals in the sea, then all the animals on the land. And where is he building to? Come on, we all know the end. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't.
To us.
Yeah, to mankind. Specifically, and I'm pointing this out to ladies, this scholars will tell you that this seems to be a hierarchy as well. He is getting more, the creations are getting more miraculous almost as it goes on, more or higher in their particular genius. So it would stand to reason that everything he creates next is more important or more or greater in some respect than everything that he created just before that. And I just asked this for no particular reason. Who was created first, man or woman? And who came next as the capstone? Women! Women are better than men in every single respect. I will say this, not as my personal opinion what it is, but as an obvious fact, because come on guys, we know this. Look in the mirror. Women are better. Division. Why the emphasis on division? You can start a story any number of ways, and one of the challenges with reading stuff, especially stuff that is so heavily encrusted with tradition and millions upon millions of commentaries saying, oh, this means that, and all of these other experts coming along and telling you what these things mean, and so much belief poured into it just from everybody on the planet saying this is what it means. It's very hard to come and take an objective look at that, strip it down to its essentials and say, I don't know. What's it really doing? Why division? If you were going to sit down today and write the history of the beginning of the universe, would you start with, well, what would God do first? He'd start dividing. Is that how you would start the story? Why division? Yeah!
I feel like in a way it's very like scenic, like you can see, like when they say like divide day and night, like you can see that happening, like and like picture it. So all these things when like he's saying it, like he's saying divide day and night, and then like divide the waters and the land, like you picture all of that.
Yeah. Everything that he's writing about there after you get out of everybody understands light and darkness. That's not that abstract, but that's as abstract as it gets. And after that, you got, land and water, animals.
It's like things that they see every day.
Things they see every day. Images that they are familiar with, that they can touch, that they can sense, that another example of divine power in an ordinary life. So it touches them specifically, and they can get their head around it. And there is something quite miraculous in that, literally miraculous, in that notion of, just seeing life flourish from nothing. It's like, and division is honestly part of that. I'm thinking of like all of those video models that I saw in high school of like, when the sperm hits the egg and it starts to multiply, and you see all these little bubbles start to come up, and those are little cells developing, and it's amazing. And you can get swept up in that. It is very inspiring. It is very beautiful. But I don't think that's all that's going on here. I think there's a very real dynamic on a social historical level. And spoiler alert, power factors in. It's very dangerous to go with broad general ideas about people who produce art of any kind. But kind of like the way with Aten, you could at least assume that for the average person walking around Lightland, the sun was a big deal. It was a primary element of their daily life. Visually, physically, it was prominent. What characteristics of daily life can we assume about the ancient Hebrews here? Well, we don't know that much. And one of the problems with the Bible is, since it was written, as it were, over so many centuries, and in honestly vastly different situations along the way, it's hard to really get a sense of who is writing it. But I would say that based on what we know historically, and I don't expect anybody to be expert in any of this, and I am not either, but it is fair to say that in the early days of the Hebrew tradition, they were largely confined to that part of the world, largely desert areas. Some of it, right there on the Mediterranean, but very warm, relatively dry. And from what we know, more in the early years than the later, but that tradition holds out largely, they were a tribal people. What does that mean? Tribalism? Tribal? A tribe? That's not an abstract word. Small group of people, similar cultural tradition, ethnic background, whatever, often just a few, clans of families who hang out together pretty much from birth to death, generation to generation. A lot of that was economic necessity. In those early days, a large portion of the Jewish tradition were nomadic shepherds. You got to stay fairly tight. It's a limited sustenance, so you can't have a big civilization wandering around after herds of sheep. You have a few families who take care of them, and they just wander around looking for grass and water. Let's go over that hill now. We were on that hill for a while. The sheep ate the grass. We're going to go over here. There's more grass. We're going to hang out here for a little while, and the sheep are going to eat all that grass. Then we're going to go over there and see if there's more grass over there. Nomads. Tribes. What do tribes generally think about other people?
No good.
No good. Very prescient. Yes.
Depends.
Depends how.
Because certain tribes will probably need other tribes to trade and develop.
Sure. They're going to come into little alliances. They're going to strike deals, particularly as civilization develops. Pretty soon, you know, it becomes a little less nomadic. Maybe they'll hang out. Maybe if you get a large enough group of people, you're starting to accumulate a fair number of people at different ages. And the older folks are going to want to hang out in the middle of the civilization and kibitz, while the younger folks go out and, you know, scatter around to the hills. But pretty soon you get a half a dozen aldercockers sitting there playing whist on the afternoon to ride out the hottest days of the day, or the hottest hours of the day, and that becomes a city because they're just sort of sitting there, and everything else is happening around them, but then returning to them at night. The emphasis on division, to me, reads as tribalism. If you are a nomadic tribe wandering around the desert 7,000 years or so ago, give or take, you're wary of other tribes. You might strike deals with them, but there is implicit in that, at least in the beginning, that you guys are different. You're not us. You know, we're us. These are my boys. You're an outsider. Division is inherent in that. Division means an understanding of us, them, division, separate. We stay separate. You want to know who we are? We're separate. We're different. We stay apart. We will write into our founding mythology of who we are, our statement of who we are, the very fact that we prioritize distinction. We are different than you are. You are different than we are. You're fine. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. I'm probably saying we're better, but don't let that get around. But they are separate. And this is, obviously, it's written right there, how God wants it. God wants division. It was the first thing he did. The act of creation of the universe itself is predicated on division. Distinction, being separate, of creating an orderly universe. And to this day, we still believe that order means everything having its place and nothing getting mixed up in the middle. I personally am more of a gumbo guy. But that got baked in. Now go back to those scrolls that are so delicate. The people who read these scrolls very few people could read. Most people, especially if you're a band of shepherds, don't need to. You have to know roughly how to count. I went into that hill with 6 sheep. I came back with about that many. In the 8 hours in between, I watched them eat and poop. And that was my day. I'm a professional. You don't need to read and write. Who could read and write? The leaders of that community? The leaders of that tribe? The people in power. The authorities in any government situation want to perpetuate a role for their people that prioritizes stability. People coming in from far away with different ideas about how doing things, well, we don't want that here. We like how we do things here. We do things with me on top, with me secure, because I'm in charge. And I will tell you a story about how God himself created the universe that reinforces my perspective that we stay away from other people, because you never know. I see them over on that hilltop over there, and they look a little shady. They're going to have some different ideas, and you know, they might kill you. They could come in at any moment and kill you. That's bad. Distinction, difference. Using literature to preserve a model of society that benefits you. Because those people carrying those very delicate scrolls around the desert for centuries, they did it because they're in power. And they could do it because they had the power to say, we're going to protect these. If your job is to watch sheep shit for 8 hours a day, you're not so concerned necessarily about the scrolls. But I'll bet those scrolls were handled with great care. Great, great care. Oh, we lost Ed? Ed died today looking after the sheep? That's too bad. But we've got the scrolls. Values come out in literature. Values are forged in literature, and values are perpetuated in literature. They tell us who these people were. Now, I could be totally wrong about all of this. I don't think I am about all of it. Probably some, who knows. But I'm using it to interpret a text that has inspired and confounded the earth for thousands of years. I'm not letting the religiosity cloud that. Now, you can totally dispel that because I am dispelling with the religious aspect of it. And I would say that's entirely up to you, and you are absolutely free to do so. But by the action of me looking in there and finding different patterns, dwelling on them for a little, ferreting out different levels of meaning that they could hold, I am sharpening the coconut so that I will now be able to go on and start looking at other texts. If something so revered and encrusted with stability, which is always bad, if I can come up at that and crack my head against it and make some sense of it, regardless of what tradition has handed down that it means, then I am a free thinker. Then I can approach anything and say, I can make sense of that. Yeah, sure. You got a warehouse full of documents for me to look at, boss? Yeah, sure. I don't know what that is. Oh, they're all electronic schematics. I'm not an engineer, but I'll open it up and I'll start flipping through. Oh, it's written in ancient Akkadian. I'm unfamiliar with the language, but let me give it a go. It's very encouraging. It's very confidence boosting. So while there are individual values and truths to be had in all literature on a literal content level, the simple act of decoding it is itself good. So that even if you have no idea what something is about, you're better for having tried. You are stronger. Because the next time you come across something sort of like that, you'll remember, oh yeah, that other thing I read. It's a little similar. Different patterns are emerging. Different traditions are going to have different things to say about the beginning of the world. Not all of them, as I suggested before, saw gods as good. Not all of them focus on God coming out and just willing something to happen. There are a lot of other creation stories where the birth of the universe is sexual. Gods come and do it, and mankind comes from that. This is not that. This is a more powerful example of divine power. You can just will something to happen. So I am not an expert in comparative religion, but I have been able to make that distinction just by noticing it's a little different. I didn't know what that was worth at the beginning, but then I come across something else sort of like it, but a little different. And when I put the two next to one another, I say, huh, that's interesting. And that's what we're here to do. Okay. A little over. I apologize. Think about everything that I just did in front of you and consider doing it yourself for your oral presentations and what you would want to talk about next. Hi! What's your name?